very focused at the conferences that the Resource Center has sponsored, and the workshops and plenary panels that we've done at those conferences are available videos also at the Resource Center website. In the newsletter I referenced, we recently published a focus on 5 key areas that we think are issue areas that need to be focused on in juvenile justice reentry. Building upon those 5 areas, not only through a frequently asked question publication that will come out soon, with a series of papers that we'll be publishing. So about the body of work, very excited to have the Juvenile Justice Advisory Group on board, working with us, advising us on some of the key issues that we need to be focused on as this work unfolds. Today, we are very fortunate to have 4 presenters with us. You can see me as a speaker. I'm actually going to be moderating the session and helping with the Q&A part of our presentation. But we also have Judge Denise Cubbin with us. Judge Cubbin is a judge in Lucas County, Ohio, in the Court of Common Pleas in the Juvenile Division. She was elected as a judge in November of 2004 and became administrative judge in April of 2007. Served as the lead judge of the Lucas County Juvenile Court, Council of Juvenile Family Court Judge Model Court, and serves on a number of committees. Prior to taking the bench, she served as a Lucas County Assistant Prosecuting Attorney for 23 years, assigned to the Juvenile Division, Criminal Division, and Senior Protection Division unit, holding supervisory positions. She received her BA degree in anthropology from American University here in Washington, D.C., and a Juris Doctor from the University of Toledo College of Law. Judge will be followed by Dr. Peter Leone, a professor at the Department of Special Education at the University of Maryland. Dr. Leone specializes in behavior disorders. His experience includes service to troubled youth as well as field-based research, which examines the multidimensional associated with behavior disorders. He's the National Center on Education, Disability, and Juvenile Justice, a research, training, and technical assistance project funded by the U.S. Department of Education. He received his master's from the University of and PhD from the University of Washington. Dr. Lee will be followed by James Reeland, served as the director of the Allegheny County Adult and Juvenile Probation Department since 2005. He recently retired from that position. Is a graduate of the University of Pittsburgh, where he earned both his Bachelor of Arts degree and his Master of Public Administration degrees. He had been serving as the Deputy Director of Casework Services and Permanency Planning at the Allegheny County of Children and Youth Services before he entered into the world of probation. Prior to appointment as Deputy Director in the Children and Youth Services, he spent almost 20 years with the Court of Common Pleas in the Allegheny County Family Division Juvenile Section. Last but not least, we will be joined by Dr. Mick Moore, formerly John Mick Moore, who received a master's degree and PhD from the University of Washington. Mick has served as a classroom teacher, audiologist, university faculty member, researcher, and educational administrator. He's been by the Puget Sound Educational Services District for the past 20 years, where he was employed as a Washington State Coordinator for Deafblind Services and the Regional Special Education Director, serving 30% of the students in the state with disabilities. In his current position as Assistant to Superintendent for Interagency Relations, he's involved in a variety of interagency, integration, and community initiatives associated with dropout prevention and retrieval, justice involvement, and child welfare issues. So we have an extraordinarily well-rounded panel, and we're looking forward to the presentations today. After these presentations, there will be a time for a short question and answer session, probably no more than 30 minutes. To ask a question, please type the question into the Q&A panel on the bottom right-hand portion of your screen. You will do it to get through as many questions as possible, and you can feel free to start loading those questions in during the course of the presentations. We will set them and then present them during that last session of the webinar. If you encounter any technical or audio problems during the webinar, please call WebEx technical support number at 1-866-293239. Again, 1-866-293239. Please, if there are some technical issues we may not be able to resolve, but we'll just to resolve the ones that arise. For the reason, however, if we're not able to resolve your issue, we will record in the event and we'll post it on the website that I gave you earlier. We should have it posted online early next week, and once it's posted, we will email you a link to the recording. With that, I'd like to turn the webinar over to Judge Coven.
Jay, and thank you for the invitation to participate on this panel and to be part of this important discussion. That is how to best meet the needs, educational and work skill development needs of the youth and adults who return to our communities having been sent to an institutional setting resulting from their delinquent behavior. I spend some time today talking about the youth's reentry into the community, the issues that must be addressed to best prepare their successful reentry, and focusing on the educational and work skill development needs of this particular population from the perspective of the bench, and the need to engage those stakeholders who are charged with overseeing their return to produce positive outcomes. So let me tell you a little bit about Lucas County, Ohio. Lucas County is located in northwest Ohio, and it's one of 88 counties in a home rule state. We have a population of 463,000 people. Toledo is the county seat with a population of 313,000. Toledo is the fourth largest city, and Lucas County is the sixth largest county in Ohio. And 23.7% of Lucas County's population is under 18 years of age. So Lucas County Juvenile Court's jurisdiction covers all case types involving juveniles. That would be delinquency, child protection, support, traffic, allocation of parental rights, and on and on. A juvenile in Ohio is defined as a person under the age of 18, and when a juvenile is adjudicated delinquent of a felony offense, the court holds jurisdiction over that child until his or her 21st birthday. So juveniles that are adjudicated delinquent of felony offenses can be committed to the Ohio Department of Youth Services, and I'll refer to that as ODYS. And when a juvenile is committed to ODYS, the court can grant, that would be the committing judge, can grant early release until the term date of the sentence or under certain circumstances with the approval of the department. When the returns home, he or she is on parole and can be recommitted to the Ohio Department of Youth Services in 90-day increments until 21. So finally, for purposes of background, the juvenile court judge has the ability to hold review hearings in all case types. That means to review a party's progress in a particular matter. So, County Juvenile Court, as with jurisdictions across the country, was looking at our commitment rates and recommitment rates of juveniles who return to the community serving sentences at ODYS. The court and ODYS and the Lucas County Board of Mental Health and Recovery Services came together as a team to plan a reentry court, and that would be following the protocols of the traditional specialty courts. So just to give you a snapshot of those juveniles that were granted early release because of their low level of committing offenses, or maybe because they had minimal behavior or institutional adjustment problems. It indicated that 52% of these kids were 18 years of age or older. 8% had academic issues. 42% were in school non-attenders with little or any credits toward high school diplomas. 24% were arrested within 1 month of being released from ODYS. And then 38% were recommitted or revoked to DYS. And 8% were eventually certified to stand trial as adults. So this is a very challenging group of youth. In the year of 2007, the Lucas County Reentry Court began with a pool of candidates coming from this pool of early release kids. So within the first year, it became apparent that this court was not working. If anything, the kids were falling down faster at a rate of maybe 50 to 60%. They were offending, failing to go through on their parole terms, or just simply absconding. So in October of October of 2009, our court received an OJJDP grant to focus on reentry. ODS was in the process of serious juvenile justice reform, and Lucas County was having some great results with the youth who had been placed at our youth treatment center. And that's a 44-bed secure residential facility for felony delinquents who otherwise could have been committed to the Department of Youth Services. The youth treatment center had implemented a cognitive behavioral model, was doing very well, but approximately one of every 3 kids who were successfully completing the residential portion of the program were eventually being committed to ODYS. CITE program, which is a work readiness program for court-involved youth, they were also having remarkable success with the kids at that time. The team decided it would contract with NCJA, thank you, Jim Reeland, to look at the current reentry program. Looking at data answered many questions and showed some interesting trends. At the in YTC Aftercare and ODYS parolees were sharing many of the same issues that were causing their failure. The strengths of programming, we developed Lucas County's new reentry model, which began in October of 2010. Reentry in Lucas County Juvenile Court, the process. It is not a program, and that is our mantra. It's a process, not a program. The court, ODYS, YTC, and stakeholders recognize that reentry efforts must begin at the time the juvenile is ordered out of his or her home and confined to the Department of Youth Services institution or YTC. Waiting until the youth is ready for release is simply too late. Now, I have to tell you that this is not an easy process, nor was it an easily traveled road. This pain shift has been a long road and has involved a lot of change at a time when all systems across the country, and in particular our part of the country, has struggled with budget challenges, layoffs, and such. To commend everyone involved, from the parents to the parole officers, probation officers, stakeholders to consultants, for hanging in there. In the short term, the positive results and satisfaction are being realized. So, lessons learned. In mixing risk levels, research indicates, and we've witnessed, that in mixing high risk of reoffending youth with risk of reoffending youth, low risk kids get worse. Reentry begins at disposition or sentencing, even before the youth leaves for the long-term placement. 35 to 45 days, a single case plan for each child in reentry is presented to the court for approval at review hearings. Parents, the youth probation, parole officers, YTC therapists, and others who are involved with the child participate in developing this case plan. It becomes a living document that's modified as the juvenile progresses toward reentry in the community and successful completion of programming. Review hearings are scheduled to monitor the juvenile's progress, and parents must be kept in the loop. We've begun having video conference review hearings with the family and the juvenile 45 days after the juvenile is committed to ODYS, or 30 days at court for the youth that are committed to YTC. Officers are assigned prior to the juvenile leaving for ODYS, and kids at YTC keep their probation officer, who becomes their aftercare worker upon their release home. The officers are required to remain in contact with the family and attend all these hearings also. Now, a large percentage of these kids are 18 and older. Return to the community. Their needs are different. Many are really, in essence, homeless. They have little, if any, education and little, if any, work skills. In fact, these 3 factors, more often than not, were the very reasons that these kids were beginning to violate parole and aftercare conditions. Finally, to ensure a smooth transition to the community in a safe environment for kids coming home, the Community Reentry Treatment Center opened May 2011, just a few weeks ago. Our hope is that the youth can use the center to transition to the community educational or work readiness programming while continuing their cognitive-based treatment to address other domains such as developing positive peer groups, avoiding gangs, avoiding drugs, and so on. There is a plan to have parent programming as well, and we hope to hire an educational specialist. So anyone involved with these kids, anyone involved with any kids who are moving into adulthood knows there are a lot of challenges and changes in that all kids experience. And we know each kid finds his or her way based on personal strengths and challenges, family, socioeconomic factors, and on and on. This particular group of juveniles presents additional challenges due to their past behavior, school behaviors or failures, and other factors which contributed to their removal from the community. The reality is that in today's world, many educational systems, mental health, and child welfare systems are facing challenges with budget constraints and the like. It is very difficult to maneuver any of these systems generally, and with this population, it's particularly difficult. We in Lucas County have worked very hard to address the educational needs for these kids, and to be honest, a lot of the resistance and non-cooperation between systems is based upon lack of knowledge, resources, and information. Because about 90% of the kids that we serve at court are Toledo residents, we work very hard to engage Toledo Public Schools to work with us to develop a menu of educational services for these kids. And we're working with Lucas County Educational Services for the GED programming. And post-secondary institutions in our area are currently embracing at-risk kids, including the court kids. And then lots of baby steps and fortitude to get where we are today. I attribute this current process to a large extent to the success of our CITE program. The reentry are all linked to this program, and it is an urban agricultural program run in cooperation with Toledo Grows and a number of community volunteers and other organizations. Our community has really embraced this program, and largely, I believe, because of the success of these kids. And consequently, the schools, post-secondary programs, and work for development programs want to work with these kids. The vision of credit recovery, virtual academy, work study opportunities, and such are quickly becoming a reality at the suggestion of a lot of these partners. So believe me, the work has just begun, and the process comes very slowly, but the hard work is beginning to pay off, as I said before. Those of you participating in the webinar today don't have to be convinced of the value of reentry programming. I encourage you to use the many resources available to you as you address educational and work skill development issues, and you're going to get a lot of great information today from the other speakers. I firmly believe that developing a menu of educational options for each child to choose from and developing work skills using positive activities and especially mentoring is the key to each juvenile or young adult's success. You know, the basic principles of juvenile justice requires each of us in our respective roles to work with youth who find themselves within the jurisdiction of juvenile court to take measures to protect the community and provide rehabilitative efforts to effect change in a child's life. Our goal is to assist these kids to become productive members of our communities. Consequently, it is each of our responsibility to make necessary system changes to accomplish these very important goals for the families and children we serve. And finally, I encourage those of you who haven't done so yet to ask juvenile court judges to become active members of your reentry teams. I know with humility that it is always amazing to me that people come to the table when the judge invites them. The work in juvenile justice reaps many benefits for the children, families, and community, and each of us understands that it is such rewarding work. In the end, treating a child who finds himself or herself before the court as if it were your child reminds each of us of the critical impact we can have in a child's life and the family's life. And no one understands these realities better than a juvenile court judge. So I've read those little slides for you, and there's some good information on them, but I would be happy to speak with anybody or provide any information to anyone who would be interested in the work that we've done here in Lucas County. Thank you.
Great, Judge Levin. Thank you very much for the information. I know we're going to have some time for questions. They're starting to come in already. But I love at the end of the presentations for all four of you, particularly Judge Cubbin, to talk about specific roles that you see the judge having. Obviously, one is the convener you mentioned. Other roles that you suggest is the non-judicial part of our audience is thinking about it would go back and what they'd ask their judges to do. Let me move on to Dr. Peter Leone. And Peter, you have the ball.
Thanks, Shay. I'd also like to say thanks to the National Reentry Resource Center for inviting me to participate today. And I'd like to begin by picking up on some comments that Judge Cubbin made in starting off by talking about our kind of responsibility to the children who become involved with the juvenile court, with the idea that we need to respond to each of them as if they were our own child. And also with the idea that each of us has a role to play in the process, whether we're representing a child in court, whether we're on the bench, whether we're an educator, or parole officer, that each of us needs to figure out how to support this process of transition and successful reentry to the community. So in contrast, perhaps, to some of the comments that were just made and some that will follow, I'm going to talk about themes and elements of both educational and vocational programming in juvenile corrections that I think cut across many of the fine examples that you'll hear today. Much of this based on my work as a former teacher, but also work in juvenile corrections in the District of Columbia, at New Beginnings Youth Center, and in a number of other jurisdictions, and I'll just a few examples a little bit later on. Let me start by talking about what I think is a set of three key elements involved in this process. The first is assessment. At youth and facilities, we need to develop a sense of what their current status is with regard to skills, their interest, aspirations, their relationship to the public schools. As Judge Cubbin noted, these children come to us, as most all of you know well, with a significant history of school failure, school difficulty. Disproportionate number of them have previously been identified and served in special education. Many of them have developed negative attitudes towards schools, towards educators, and they don't see a real connection between what educators and others are attempting to do with them and their future at all. So that first piece is assessment, and I'll talk a little bit further about that in a minute or two. But I think that's a key element, kind of understanding where the child is at as he or she enters juvenile corrections. Second piece is engagement, and that is connecting with students on a personal basis, helping them get invested in the process of programming, helping them develop a sense that, yes, it can be trusted, and that we are in it with them, attempting to help them become ready for that process of return to the community. And then finally, preparation, the idea that we've identified specific academic, vocational skills, specific things that they're going to learn, that we're going to work with them to further develop as we prepare them to enter the community. Underlying all of this, and a key element that I think cannot be emphasized is this notion of motivation. And I think that within a correctional facility, I like to think of it as an educational environment in an ideal sense. The idea that we're all there for one particular purpose, and that is to see that the youth further develop and have other options as they leave the institution. And and we as role models provide examples for the kinds of behaviors, the kinds of interactions, and the kinds of opportunities that exist in the larger world. And so if youth connect with a significant adult, whether it's an educator, whether it's a youth care worker, whether it's custody staff, that can provide that link to opportunities that they can develop. So we'll talk a little bit now about assessment. Assessment is really a process of identifying where the youth, where he or she is in terms of specific skills. Tool skills such as literacy and numeracy can't be overemphasized. Too frequently in corrections and juvenile corrections, the duplicative process whereby assessment staff member will give some informal or formal tests. The teacher will repeat that process. Information might be developed, but there's not often a unified understanding of how that relates to particular instructional programs, and it also has a lot to do with whether the facility is designed as a short-term placement for the youth or a long-term placement. Another issue is special needs. As I mentioned, many youth come to the facility with a history of special ed services. Some may be identified as eligible for Section 504 accommodations. It's essential that staff in the facilities understand what those are so that youth's behavior can be understood in that context, so that failure to respond to programming won't immediately be identified as a lack of compliance, but rather a lack of ability or lack of understanding of what the expectations are. For some students, newly presented information can be very confusing, and understanding and working with the youth to develop specific skills and strategies to access the curriculum and to develop the skills is a key part of that. Another part of assessment is understanding child's previous school history. We need to be able to tailor services and supports so that every youth coming into any particular facility is not automatically assigned a particular program based on his or her age. So, for example, 17-year-olds with few high school credits should not automatically be put into a sequence that leads to accumulation of more credits, because when they leave the facility, even having like 10 or 15 credits is not sufficient for them to be able to graduate any time before they're 22. Similarly, for students who come into a facility with a large number of credits, we just need a few in order to graduate. We need to be able to use online resources. We need to be able to pull a teacher into a facility to teach a particular course, whether it's a foreign language course, whether it's a math course, so that they can fill those gaps and graduate. GED preparation should be part of the process, part of an option available to some youth. Social skills, another area that can become part of the curriculum, and understanding whether youth have well-developed social skills, working in partnership with treatment staff is part of that process. Through informal interviews, we can develop during the assessment process an understanding of youth's interests and aspirations. We're able to ask youth during this informal assessment questions like, what do you see yourself doing a year from now? How about 5 years from now? When youth come up with specific items, follow-up questions that say, do you know what you need to do to get from where you are to achieve that particular occupation, to enter that junior college or that career and technical program? Oftentimes, we hear youth saying things like, "Yeah, my brother-in-law or my uncle or my mother's boyfriend does that kind of work," and they've developed a sense of what they need to do, but they often don't have the skills and they don't have a roadmap of what the steps might be in that process. When you respond with questions or with comments about aspirations to play professional sports, we need to take those seriously, but we need to be able to follow up with questions saying, well, okay, what's your fallback position? What if you get injured? Many times, youth will have, I think, unrealistic aspirations, particularly with regard to professional sports and other things like that. And finally, under the whole assessment process, we need to talk to youth and develop a sense about family and community supports for the interests and aspirations that they've developed. Understanding the local economy, understanding the kinds of jobs that might be available in the community makes it much easier to talk with youth specifically and to talk with employers in the community about their need for entry-level employees after youth leave the facility. Now to the next aspect, and that is this whole process of engagement and preparation. One of the things that I think we need to be consistent about is the notion that every single youth has the opportunity and ability to achieve and to leave the facility more confident and capable than when he entered that facility. I reject the notion that there's any youth that's unreachable. It's just a question of us. The burden is on us to figure out what we need to do, how we need to organize programs and services to connect with those youth. So how have facilities accomplished? How have they generated a sense of engagement? The one-on-one connection with each youth that was mentioned in the earlier presentation, recognition of achievement, growth, in effort and citizenship, model what matters. And as educators and staff in institutions, we need to treat the time that the youth spend with us as valuable time. That means showing up, following through, being well prepared, not being afraid to challenge youth intellectually. Having programs that can generate that kind of engagement is what makes the difference and what can help youth understand that they're capable. I had working in I mentioned the District of Columbia, but also working over the years in Delaware, Colorado, Hawaii, and most recently in Southern California, I had the opportunity to interview youth in programs that at one time were not in good shape at all, where the staff kind of said, well, these kids are failing and, they just don't care. These are the kids that failed in the public schools and they're exhibiting the same kind of behavior here. My belief is that we figured out in some cases how to reach those students. And through a one-to-one connection, through an assessment process that youth with exciting things that could going on in their lives, with exciting options and opportunities, we can get those youth reconnected. I cite, for example, or as an example, the literacy program at the Hawaii Youth Correctional Facility. It's a facility that has gone through a dramatic change in the last few years, and where every youth in the facility reads, and it's because of the dedicated reading time. It's because of a librarian who promotes books the way a used car salesman promotes his cars on a Saturday afternoon. And I visit that facility, and every youth can say, "Here's what I'm reading right now." And you can ask youth, "How are you doing? What kind of reader are you?" And the youth will respond saying, "Yeah, I'm a pretty good reader." And you ask them what they're reading, and it's a very basic book. But they've internalized that notion that they're capable and competent, and I think that's really the key. It's that notion of self-efficacy. So, with regard to engagement, intensive educational opportunities, intensive literacy programs, close monitoring of engagement are all associated with student achievement gains. We can't put a bunch of students into a classroom, stand up in the front, and talk at them. We need to give them opportunities to not just listen, but respond, to communicate with each other. We need to keep track of their progress. And through that process, they develop this sense that, yeah, you know, this is something I can learn. I am competent and capable. Finally, this notion of preparation, we need to connect the things that we are teach to students with the reentry plans that are developed in partnership with our colleagues in the juvenile facility. We need to be able to articulate the connection between what students are doing and their reentry plan. And I can't overemphasize the important custody staff involvement in this process. I've been in classrooms where custody staff are involved, and they participate in the discussions. You know, they shoot their hand up when the teachers ask general questions, and then sometimes they respond, and the kids say, "Wow, you do that," you know, as if to say, "Smart." How do you figure that out? How do you know those kinds of things? But it models the behavior for the youth that we're all learners, and there's not anything that some of us can't learn more about, become more competent in doing. So we need to ensure that the ways in which we design the programs and the services both engage the youth and prepare them to be more competent as we move towards return to the community. So I've identified on this next slide here this notion that assessment, preparation, and engagement is an integral part of getting kids ready and ensuring that that juvenile reentry plan that includes elements from assessment is developed in a way that promotes and ensures success as youth return to the community. The assessment program and reentry process at New Beginnings at the Maya Angelou Academy, I think, is really an outstanding example. They call their assessment center the Welcome Center. And during the first few days within the facility, the youth develop a sense that, boy, there's people here that listen to me, that care about me, that put up with my initial resistance to this whole process, and you know they're going to be there tomorrow, and they're going to be patient, and they're going to wait, and they're going to connect with me. I'm going to be able to leave this facility with some options that perhaps I didn't have before. So that's just a quick overview of what I think are some key elements, some key principles associated with this reentry process. So I will just close with a slide with some contact information, and be glad to respond to any questions or respond to any information or request for information after the webinar. Let me turn it back over to you, Shay.
Thank you. That's terrific information. And with that, we're going to move over to Jim. Jim, you're on.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be with all of you today. And I'm talking about the probation department's participation in the whole educational realm. Have here with my slides. Okay, I got it. From the probation officer's point of view, we needed to get, first of all, the department to understand that education is important. And I can't overstate that enough. Until the department and until the juvenile justice system views education as an important aspect of the work done by both the department and the court, we're going to continue to spin our wheels. So one aspect of what the probation department can do is hire or train probation officers who have an educational base. And so what we're able to do is actually bring in former teachers to join our probation department, because we found very early on that individuals that speak the same language as those in the educational world were much more effective. Secondly, I'm going to talk about a joint venture that took place in Pennsylvania between Allegheny County and Philadelphia County Probation Departments. So, the task at hand, again, is to bring specialists if possible, but also to begin to train your probation staff to understand educational law and advocacy. Although some of these aspects of what we expect our educational specialists to do might seem simplistic, things like getting a transcript from a home school district or getting course schedules from a home school district, many of you might understand that that is a difficult task. And so one of the goals that we stated for our staff was to be able to do this within 10 days. Similarly, we wanted to move away from what we would refer to as seat time or chair time in a classroom in a residential program and begin looking at concrete courses that are well aligned with either the home school district or the state standards, as well as giving youth the opportunity to gain some credits in a recovery or an acceleration program. We looked at how do young people re-enter the community from placement. We understood, and as many of you do, it's a difficult task because many times a young person is not welcomed back to the school and might be seen as a problem child. So we wanted to be able to facilitate the re-entry. We did that by scheduling a pre-release or discharge meeting with people about 3 weeks before actual discharge. And again, that might seem simplistic, but I would venture to say that many of us would just tell the young offender, show up at school Monday morning, and things will just happen. Things don't happen. So one of the things that we did in the pre-release process was finalize schedules, arrange for books, or for transportation, which is an important one not to leave out. Sure, you talk about extracurricular activities, and lastly, have parents sign all documents. What this does is remove any of the elements of problems or roadblocks for the young person re-entering the school system. And what we try to stress with folks is to an atmosphere where the young person is actually welcomed back to the school and welcomed back to the school community. So again, one of the benefits of being involved in the MacArthur Foundation Model for Change program was the opportunity working through the Educational Law Center to develop a toolkit for juvenile justice professionals. On this slide, you have the website address, but it's a good tool to begin training staff, not in the fine detail of school law or advocacy, but making sure people understand the overall elements that are involved. The next conversation, I'd like to get into this joint venture that took place between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia probation departments. Geographically, those departments are about 300 miles apart, so it was important for us to be able to develop a collaboration with our partners on this whole issue of reentry and education. I'd like to say, too, that between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia in the state of Pennsylvania, those two counties are responsible for about 60%, 65% of all of the youth that go into placements. It was ideal to bring these two counties together in 2008 to start talking about how we can improve this whole element of education and reentry. So for us was to approach this from a two-pronged approach, was academically, and one was current technical training. And what we're able to do was bring on board the 9 biggest programs in Pennsylvania and start having this discussion with those residential programs about how to change their programs and how to change the elements of their programs, accomplishing the task that we were looking for them to do. And much of what had to be done was improving the communication between residential facilities and home schools. And a lot of work has taken place to eliminate and address any of the barriers that are preventing a smooth transition for the young person to come into the system. I mentioned before one of the things that we learned in our own department in Allegheny County was the focus on the academic side of this, and this is one of the components of what the PACTT program, the Pennsylvania Academic Career and Technical Training Alliance, has approached. And we've worked on many of the same elements statewide now that we start working on in our own department. And again, the whole idea here, trying to get a transcript within 10 days of a youth's arrival in some places is monumental. You have experienced, and it's not uncommon to hear about, it takes a month, it takes 6 weeks to get a kid's transcript from their home school district to arrive at the residential placement that they're in, which is obviously not a good practice. So we have a lot of effort that's taken place to bring the transcript and get it in a timely way. We also then wanted to focus on career and technical training and get away from the kind of programming that people were doing just because it felt good or because we had a staff that was expert in welding. We start looking at what does the world need, what does the community need in order to better prepare our young people to actually get employment. Some things on the academic side I've already addressed, but again, getting your the most important of this is aligning curriculums and residential programs and getting opportunities for credit recovery and acceleration if that's possible. Our computer programs that are out, software programs that assist residential programs to connect with home school districts to allow for that to occur. The most interesting aspect of what we've done in the project is to look at what are the skills, both the hard skills and soft skills that a young person needs or that the work world needs, and a couple of certifications that we went after that aren't difficult to accomplish in a residential setting, but yet bring value when you look at what an employer or what the work world needs. Address those in a moment. The 10 certificate, ServSafe, and Microsoft are three that we have focused on in Pennsylvania, and they're certificates that the work world recognizes as being beneficial. O10 is an occupational safety and health administration safety course that can be conducted at the institution or at the residential program, and most importantly, it's the same course that any construction worker or any worker who needs a safety certificate will have in the work world community. So it's a way for a young offender to build a resume and to be a portfolio enhancer. SAFE, likewise, is a certificate program that can be taught on grounds. It's a kind of a program that is needed for any restaurant, anywhere, to have individuals who have accomplished the certificate in food protection. Again, it's something that can easily be done on grounds prepared for the culinary arts. And lastly, we have the Microsoft Office package, which again can prepare offenders to be able to work in any off setting. So as I conclude my remarks, I mean, it's important to be able to focus on education, to get people in the juvenile justice system, from the judge to the probation staff to residential staff, to believe education is important. And as has been talked about previously, that will translate and trickle down to the people in the program. Take the effort and the time to train the staff on education law and advocacy. Staff need to understand the very basics of how long can a youth be suspended for, what happens when a youth is expelled. Many times parents of our young people are not stepping up and are not armed with the correct knowledge to confront the school district when suspensions or expulsions take place. So staff can certainly play that role. Both on academic and career training, where the career training is aligned with what the work world is needing, as well as looking for the academic side to be aligned with school standards, either the home school district or state standards. And then don't expect the youth to just walk home and re-enroll in school, but the system, whether it's probation or others, needs to facilitate youth reentry to school and the community. And lastly, to focus on certifications that are valued and required by the business community. Could do that, and those important aspects of being successful with our young people in placement. Thank you.
Good thing. Thank you very much. It's great material, and lots of questions coming in. So if you are thinking about asking a question, I suggest you submit it. The stack was pretty at this point. Mick, you're on. Let's hear what's going on in Washington State.
Excellent. First of all, I think I'd like to invite Judge Cuban and Dr. Leone and Mr. Ryland to come to Seattle and live. It's so interesting to hear these themes coming up over and over again, and I think the presentation that I'm about to give you regarding what's happening at one local community will reinforce a lot of those themes. So let's get right into that. Okay. Let's see. There we go. So what I'm going to do is briefly present basically three areas. The first area is to talk about the PathNet initiative and what's happening here, and the emphasis on kind of the big picture, developing language, looking at the concept of such things as a GED plus, and looking at the structure. The second part, I'm going to talk about the policy, and I think policy is often overlooked as a critical element of making gains and providing systems change within any community. And then I want to talk about local efforts here in the Seattle area with three programs that are within the PathNet network that we're looking at. The whole thing starts with a good idea. We noted that a lot of youth that are involved in juvenile justice in our community were not having much option to move forward. They weren't seeking a diploma. And that's because many of our schools were looking at diploma-bound kids the option, and the alternative programs weren't available. And in fact, we were blocked a little bit with our No Child Left Behind initiative in federal legislation that basically says in policy a GED is not something that they'll support, and it's any kid seeking a GED ends up being deemed as a dropout. And so there is a need here to move forward with trying to other options. And basically we came up with this PathNet, and again, it's an initiative, it's a system, it's not a program. And so the what is kind of looking at how do we re-engage our youth, especially around best practices, especially for those that are 16, 17, 18 years old with 2 or 3 credits and are not high school bound. Secondly, the how is really to bring together a network of providers and utilize the efforts that local programs are paid to do in order to bring a network together that can provide a complete systems-wide seamless process of connection. And so look at this slide. You'll see the top of the slide indicates the normal pathway. And so you have your little high school student with expected outcome of a high school diploma. And that's where the education process often looks at. It's diploma-based. Our federal legislation is based on getting the diploma. You're penalized for dropouts. You're penalized for not having an adequate yearly progress toward graduation and so forth and so on. And what we're looking at is this bottom level. And this essentially are the kids that we're talking about today. They're disengaged. They're involved in juvenile justice. They're income. They're having gang involvement and other kinds of issues. And we've created as an alternative path. And it's on 4 cornerstones that have been reiterated with our other speakers, and I'll talk to those at the next slide. And the tool of trying to move youth back into a diploma, it is the best way to go. But if they are 18 and have 3 credits and are not going to go back to high school, then we do. And we have found this concept of having a GED plus to be a very excellent way of moving forward. So I want to talk to you for a minute about the 4 cornerstones of PathNet. And the first one is basically a strength-based assessment that's current. And so what we look here is the idea of these kids changing their self-image. Was mentioned by Dr. Leone in regard to motivation. Well, these kids have been looked at, and their self-perception is that they're losers, that they haven't been able to be successful. And so we want to look at their strengths and base that on that. And I'm pleased to see that this also aligned to the key area of the 5 emerging practices in juvenile justice reentry that was recently published. The cornerstone is a student-driven plan. So what we found is that if these students are going to move forward, they plan. And our mantra here is no plan, no hope. All of that had plans. And without a plan, there's really no way to proceed forward. And so there's strength-based ability, and we form the plan. They form the plan. We help support it. And we have a person in the PathNet network called an educational vocational specialist that helps the student do that. The third stone is connectivity. It's a big one. We've been this initiative has been going on for 8 years here in the Seattle community, and part of our effort during the long period of time that we had no funding, try to engage partners that do the things that they do. So vocational training programs, community colleges, pre-apprenticeships, and so forth, and bring them in and allow us then to offer these connections to our students. One of our best examples is if a student is motivated to become a pilot or be around aircraft, we have a program called the Skyway program that's an airplane that they build and disassemble every year, and they also have a training apparatus that allows students to get the feel of what it's like to be the cockpit of a plane. And this leads to other jobs around mechanics, around aviation, gives the motivation to move on. And so that connectivity is absolutely essential as one of our cornerstones. Our last cornerstone is to have an adult. That the research shows that one of the reasons that kids disengage is because they don't have someone in their life who is an adult figure who can help guide them. And we make sure that we have a person who we've called in our network language a care manager, but it's basically any adult who cares for the kid. It could be a minister, it could be a friend, it could be a teacher. For that adult, and then we bring them into the planning process. The big step that we've been pushing is the GED Plus, and I love this picture because it shows the hand of kind of education and crossing in this track meet to the hand that provides the vocational career outcome. It's all at the same time, and it's done seamlessly. And so GED Plus means a GED Plus an immediate connection to the educational vocational step. And so it's a way to move forward, to get these an alternative, and to maintain the end goal of career and living wage job. In and of the structure, this is kind of what it looks like with this slide. You'll see at the top we're looking at referrals from a variety of agencies. BECA is our law around truancy. On the side, we have an in-school track. On the left side, we have an out-of-school connections coordinator. We then work with a variety of community programs. We have the dropout engagement. The key part for us is the PathNet administrator right in the middle. All the other programs are funded by other agencies doing the work that they do, but in a coordinated fashion, coordinated by our PathNet administrator. It's a system that works without having a great deal of funding, but us to get the job done. The part I want to talk about is policy, and I really want to emphasize this because it's not always thought of, and I think in the earlier presentations, policy was involved in everybody's work. It wasn't always recognized, and we found that for years here, without any funding, policy was one of the things that we turned to, and so I had the opportunity to basically get a big push in 2006 when the Dropout Nation article came out of the Time magazine calling us one of the worst dropout nations in the world. Followed 2 weeks later by the silent epidemic with the Gates Foundation. And they had a local CEO program, Career Education Options program, that was doing a terrific job in a small manner. And we decided to look at those facts and then organize a steering committee, write positions papers, papers, do presentations, and start talking about this issue. And we had word recognition, which is really important when you do policy change. And words that people, legislators, and others in this state will say is they'll mention PathNet, they'll talk about GED+. It's starting to show up in meetings. It's starting to be discussed by our legislators. And this whole mantra of no plan, no hope is very well discussed in our community. Sort of position paper, because you have to collect the facts and get the need down. And when you write it, it really becomes clear. We did a lot of updates, and they did a lot of documentations by writing a summary of the paper, writing legislative priorities, talking to legislators, and again, not advocating, but mere showing the facts and things that needed to change. And then getting help from other supporters that are helping us at the national level, trying to talk to the Department of Ed about the GED Plus option, be incentive rather than a disincentive, writing additional addendums to those kinds of papers, presentations, and so forth. And so just moving that into a document. The big plus, I think, and when I look back on it, I'm very pleased and very surprised, was that our position paper led to a writing of a legislative initiative called Building Bridges in the state of Washington. And it was the first legislation on dropouts, and it basically called for the creation of a pilot. It was a 2-year program looking at pilot programs and what's working, and also trying to have recommendations as to what to do. And the third out of 3 recommendations was that our state creates a dropout retrieval system for 16 to 21-year-olds who are not likely to return to school. This PathNet institutional ability and support that we'd never had before. Those recommendations then were led to House Bill 1418, which called for that statewide dropout retrieval program. It took 2 years to talk that through legislators, and it was finally passed in 2010. And the big thing here is that we were able then, as a recommendation of our legislators, was to create a dropout House Bill 1418 implementation committee. And many members of our PathNet committee and many members of our group are on those committees and are on that steering committee. So having that same information shared at the state level. Well, I just want to talk about 3 examples of program that is within the PathNet network. This one is called Avanza, and it's a local partnership with our public schools, with the Center for Children and Youth Justice, who hosts the program. We're training our ESD, drug and alcohol, and the juvenile courts. And it's a dropout intervention program focused on Latino youth. And the big deal here is that we have a Latino care manager. And the Latino care manager provides that adult assistance, but also provides educational support and reengagement. This program has found tremendous success in terms of looking at 87% are making progress toward graduation in this. And these are kids that were on the road to drop out, had been in many cases involved with truancy, and we've really been able to turn those kids around. The small program, a program of about 30 youth per year with one care manager. But using the 4 cornerstones, we're having tremendous progress. My favorite outcomes of this is a social justice initiative where our youth from Avanza were able to build a totem pole at one of our local camps that our public schools use, and it with the support of a Native American artist. And each youth brought their culture into the totem pole. And it's just a wonderful sight to see, and it's a really good way of giving back. And the kids, it really motivated them and restored their self-esteem. The second program I want to talk about is called LEAP, and it's basically a Department of Labor grant. It's with our high-end kids, 225 youth coming out of either our jails and on probation, or coming out of detention and coming out of jails and parole, coming out of our detention center and being on probation. This we found a great deal of success with 99 or 79% of the students going back to school or working, and 42% have received work experience. And so we're the real suggestion of the re-engagement. The numbers aren't probably as high as we'd like to be, but this is a very difficult population to re-engage. The final program I want to talk about is the PathNet pilot. This is one that's provided by the MacArthur Foundation's Models for Change. And basically, it was an opportunity to do what we say we can do. And we're looking at 100 juvenile youth per year with moderate to high risk to reoffend. And this program has shown a great ability to get this strength-based assessment. 81% have been involved in that. 74% are re-engaged in education, and so forth. 30% have completed their GED, and 100% of our graduates are working on extended pathways around education and whatnot. Kind of in conclusion, here is an overview of PathNet community partners. And again, see the PathNet manager, Dr. Kelly Goodsell, is funded through the MacArthur Foundation. And then on the left, we have a number of educational specialists on the Avanza project and funded through the Center for Child and Youth Justice. We have other positions through a DOL grant. We in fact, we have 8 care managers through that grant. We also have buy-in from the State Department of Education, where we have an ESD employee that's working in our detention centers and in our jails, and a connections coordinator that's being totally funded on hard dollars from our courts. They've kind of seen the light in having this educational connection, which the others had talked about. With all of our programs, we're looking to decrease recidivism, increase that educational post-secondary replacement, and basically get to the bottom line that we have to keep in sight, that is a living wage job and career. And so moving forward on our measurement with other national entities that are supporting us, and we're looking for a view of taking this to a larger scale. I do want to point out that when we talk about the 4 cornerstones, that these issues of education and using the GED and connecting with jobs and motivational engagement that Dr. Leone talked about, the G+, I think, has come up 3 times, or the GED, and evading that, and then looking at the career and technical education that Mr. Ryland talked about. We're seeing those themes right there. And so in a wrap-up, to promote this in your local community, identify your idea, identify policy that goes with it, and then begin to implement it. What we've learned, which is so similar to the others as well, is that reentry is process. It is a process, rather. It's not a singular event. It takes a long time. Educational planning is essential, and all 3 speakers have said that. We have to have education at the table. The G+ is an excellent vehicle for reentry. You build relationships on positions, not on personalities, and we've had people come and go. We've had programs that are ignited by personalities, and we found that you have to have the positions institutionalized. Don't overlook policy, and systems integration takes a long, long time. If you have more questions, here's the information. Please don't hesitate to contact me or Kelly Goodsell, my colleague who is managing this program. Okay, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all 4 of you, Judge Cubman, Dr. Leone, James Freeland, and Dr. McMoore. We're going to now to the question and answer session. To ask a question, again, please type the question into the Q&A panel on your screen, which is on the bottom right-hand part of your screen. A number obviously have already picked up on this because I've got over 20 questions already submitted. I'm going to read questions coming in from the audience. I'm going to try to cluster them away to as many of them as possible, and then give time for our panelists to respond. Mick, I'll actually start with you, and a follow-up question that I received wanting to know whether some of your material is posted online, and the position paper in particular. Do you have a place where people can access paper?
We have a website established, and I can contact me. I'll send you the link to that website. I don't have it memorized offhand, but it's very much available. All of the key documents that I've talked about through the PathNet initiative are available on our website, so I can make that available to anybody that would contact me.
Okay. And what we'll try to do, Mick, is we'll try to create a link on our website for the NRC so that some of that can be accessed more easily and more broadly nationally. One specific question for you, Mick, that came in right when you were presenting. And the question is, what did the Dropout Retrieval Program provide? Was there additional financial support for GED+, and how was that provided, if it was additional financial support?
There was no additional financial support other than funding that came in for the PathNet manager. That what we've done is we've brought together our partnership and we've sought grants and additional funding in the PathNet model, and then using the strength of collaboration and the strength of our partners. and seeking out other kinds of funding. And also, as shown with the courts, some of our partners are finding that these positions need to be core funded by their own departments, and so we're starting to engage in permanency in terms of having some of those positions be a regular part of a program. And Jim pointed that out well in terms of the courts saying, hey, we need people in education, and we're finding that here as well.
Great. Thanks, Mick. I'm going to come back to you as I promised I would. Obviously, from your statement, it's clear, I think most people on the line would agree that a judge can be a wonderful convener. There's authority, integrity in the bench to convene people. Other roles in particular around reentry and education that you have to see a judge play in the ideal circuit or district?
I think that you can use your judge as a source of a lot of resources. The courts have a wealth of data and information, demographic information and such about the children that we all want to serve. And that data is very helpful as you're going to funding sources, whether it be in the community or grant writing and such. The courts also, and judges, also have a great wealth of information that they have the ability to dispense to the community in a thoughtful and credible way. As you are approaching your naysayers in the community, your potential, I should say, naysayers in the community, it is very helpful to have the judge lead the discussion off, because the judge will always bring the conversation from a very broad policy conversation to a very personal conversation. These children that we see every day in court, making the children real. If I have found in Lucas County that when we are looking at programming changes, it's very important and helpful to go to the community to educate different parts of the community on a particular topic, what in programming that you're talking about. For example, juvenile sex offenders. When you judge, come to the community and have the conversation on these topics, it gives credibility and dispels myths quickly, especially when you're talking about sensitive topics like violent juvenile offenders, as an example, and looking at the education. Do we want these children in our schools poisoning or lowering, for example, our graduation rates? Let's see.
Great. Those are great ideas.
Great.
And a couple of other questions that have come in. Who in the correctional institution is responsible for knowing about either the educational or the world of work opportunities that may be available to the youth upon reentry? And how involved is the school district and local businesses in this process? So I'm going to turn here either to Peter or to James Reeland to initially answer this question.
The question begins with if there's a case manager who has responsibility for the youth in the institution, and I think you can underestimate the value of probation officers visiting youth in the institution while building the reentry plan. And so I don't think there's any one person in the institution that I would lean to, but I would look to a partnership with probation because an institution obviously is not going to be able to know the community resources like a probation officer does, being they have kids from all over the state. So I think it has to be a joint venture, and that the residential program must rely on other sources for getting the information. I think the key to it is the program staff asking the questions, pushing the probation officer and the court for the answers.
Yeah, I could just add to what James said. I do agree that it isn't any one person's responsibility, but rather it's a shared responsibility. For facilities that are more regionally or locally based, I would really expect the educators to work in partnership with probation to really be aware of kind of local trends and opportunities that exist, because that's part of what they need to be talking with their student about in the classroom, and so that you can make that connection between the preparation that happens within the institution and then hand off to the community. It's facilitated through probation officers.
So I'm hearing both of you say really it's a team effort. A team would be the community probation officer, parole officer working with the craft, almost using a kind of a team decision-making, interdisciplinary team type approach with educators, with the caseworker in the facility to begin planning for this and creating those connections to the community. So the second part of the question, in terms of how involved is the school district and local businesses, they'll be involved as that team brings them into this process. Am I hearing you right?
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay,
absolutely.
Great. Next question. How can schools make it easier for officers to get transcripts, understand the educational paradigm that the young person is finding themselves confronting? Appropriate, Jim? Is that you?
I think the first step probably in most jurisdictions is to make sure you have a release of information on file from the parents, and if in the absence of that, to make sure you get a court order so that the school can release the information. I think the bigger the school district is, the more complicated this becomes. If you've got, like a city of Pittsburgh or Philadelphia, where you've got multiple things, it becomes somewhat difficult. And so one of the answers to that question is to centralize your points of contact. So the probation department has one contact that would be working with the school districts to get the information, and hopefully we can identify a point of contact at the school district so that those two entities can develop relationships and the flow of information can move. And you'll have to remember that many times the individuals we're talking about here are not favorite students of schools, and so they may not always move as quickly as you might hope. But it always comes down to building that relationship with the entity responsible for the practice.
Great. Now that leads us to a series of questions I'm going to try to cluster here. And it's with this relationship with the home school and with the teachers and staff. So the question, what is the role of a public school teacher? What are some of the things that a public school teacher can do to help at-risk juveniles stay at school? That's the first part of the question. And if we do a better job of changing negative perceptions of youth in the school system by either teachers or administrators who have contact now with the system. Strategies that anyone on the call has that they would recommend that really creates this kind of bridge and different normative perception of who these kids are, or at least treating them on an individualized basis rather than categorizing all of them in one group as kids we don't want in our schools. Any strategies or suggestions you might have?
The first strategy that we've attempted in Pennsylvania is the development of the whole idea of school-based probation officers. And so if a department is able to place a probation officer full-time at a school, then just by that probation officer being there, relationships are built with administration and teachers and others concerned with the extracurricular activities. So that's one strategy that has been invoked that has worked extremely well. In terms of teachers working directly with kids to try to keep them in school, I think what you'll hear repetitively from kids in discussing this is that a teacher shows interest in them, and don't be looked at constantly as a knucklehead that everyone is waiting to get out of school. And now that's a two-way street, obviously, that the student must also be respectful and participate appropriately. But I think that's what you'll hear, though, is kids talking about it. The subject wasn't interesting, and the teacher picked on me or didn't like me or didn't take an interest in me.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely.
Peter?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to add to what I think James just said, and that is, when I was an educator and worked with at-risk kids, one of the comments that I thought was most effective in working with other teachers was helping them understand what Judge Cubbin said early on, this notion that these were all of our children. And kind of rhetorically, I would say to the teachers, if you don't think these kids belong in the school, you're not going to be able during the middle of the school day to keep them out of your cars and out of your houses. These are all of our children, and you know, have a shared responsibility for educating them. It isn't always popular, but I think this notion that we get them out of the school is then a better place. What we're doing is pushing the problem into the community and kind of avoiding addressing kind of disengagement that some kids experience. I think educators sometimes in some schools have a very narrow sense of what it means to be an engaged student, and I think it's where a good alternative program, or that's where key programs or processes within comprehensive middle and high schools can connect with kids and keep them in schools.
Peter,
if I could just
go ahead, Judge.
You just piggyback for 1 second on a couple things you said. One of the successes of our CITE program was that we went to the media and asked the media to come and meet some of these kids. And
great.
the kids are now the face of the program. They write stories regularly about their success. We've started to write stories about these kids, too, who are successful in spite of all of the challenges they've had in their lives at the school. And recently, I was making a presentation. There was a teacher who, at the course, at the end of the presentation, she came up and thanked me for all the information that I gave her. She was surprised that I had all this program. She thought we just slapped kids' hands and didn't do anything for these kids that came before us. And my thought was, why don't you come to court and you sit in the back of my courtroom? And you can, we do, which opened the door to, why don't we do some in-services this year for the teachers and let them know what we're doing to help them? So that's a suggestion.
And one of the things this is Mick, that we've done here in the Seattle community is we have an initiative called Uniting for Youth, and with that we've been bringing in juvenile justice staff and employees and having them work with school staff and employees about how they do their business and debunking myths about what agencies do, and with the bottom line that everybody's mentioned, but that is building relationships. And the second thing that we've done that I think is crucial is that we've provided an information sharing guide that allows each agency to look at what the rules are in conjunction with what the rules are of the agency that they're contacting. So it could be social welfare and juvenile justice. And it lays out the laws. And it kind of deters one from just saying, I can't share that with you because it's confidential or I don't want to talk to you or whatever. But again, the bottom line has been sharing the information, build relationships between systems, and doing co-trainings.
Excellent. You all. Next question. This is a person from New York State in the Office of Children and Family Services indicating that they've been coordinating a curriculum mapping alignment project for those 2 years. They're wondering whether anyone can recommend a resource for specific teaching strategies that are effective with students in residential placement. Peter?
You know, there was some work done by folks at Michigan State. They developed a curriculum, and I'm blanking on the name of the primary author of that, but it was a curriculum for youth in short-term facilities, for detention facilities. Carol Kramer Brooks and colleagues developed, I think, effective curriculum and curriculum strategies for those facilities. You know, I'm also a firm believer in that good instructional practices begin with aging youth, and that there's lots of different ways to make that happen. I think in particularly in short-term facilities, the amount of turnover sometimes makes it difficult to get kids engaged. And I think in those kinds of facilities, having an entry classroom, having where kids spend the first couple of weeks and where most of the transition occurs, and then having a school program that's aligned with either regional or state curriculum makes most sense in terms of actual planning and instruction.
Great. Anybody else have an answer to that question? That's a starting place, Peter. Next question. If discharge of a youth from a facility and the return to the community is going to happen at the beginning of or during the summer months when school is not in session. What do you have for programmatically reconnecting the youth immediately in the educational system?
I think that one of the keys is to make sure that there's been the relationship built with the local school where this kid's returning. So in our community, it would be developing that student's current level of strength, and then the plan that the student will deliver, and making sure that the educational folks who are receiving that child are of that plan and part of the supportive group that it will take to the support it will take that youth to be successful.
So then making sure there's some programming going on in the summer that effectuate that plan, but since a lot of times you don't have the main school system going.
Yeah, and it's not just schools, and so hopefully through the PathNet system, what we would do is find some things that this youth could do that would support that student-driven plan within the community. So it'd be going to a youth source program or a Seattle Learn Center North, or programs that are operating not on a public school schedule in order to provide additional support, tutoring, mentoring to help this youth be successful when they step foot back on that school campus.
Yes, in Toledo, we had a conversation with our Toledo Public Schools about the notion of using our CITE program I was talking about to develop some work-study programming for some of the kids during this summer, so they can at least get some credits. And the big push is a lot of the online programming. It's the Plato program they're going to begin, and I'm going to try to get it going up in our detention facility to experiment with these at-risk kids to see how successful the programming can be. So they may not necessarily be getting credit in that respect, but we're starting to get them used to using an educational tool, and we told them we would look for tutoring resources. So it's that cooperation. You help me a little bit, we'll help you a little bit.
So it really is an opportunity there to answer that question we just did. Another one, because another question came in, is what was the role of the public schools in developing the educational plan when the youth is in care? And what you say is either whether they're going back during the summer, going back during the school year, the Toledo Public Schools or any school system needs to be involved in that planning process in an active way. And then it doesn't matter whether we're out of school for the summer or not. There'll be some program developed for that young person.
Exactly what we talked about yesterday.
So 2 more questions, and then I know we're at 3:30 Eastern Time. I know we're supposed to be done, but we're going to extend about 5 minutes. Last 2 questions underway. 1, thoughts on how trauma-informed practice gets integrated into the assessment and planning process. Many of the youth in our system struggle with various cognitive and emotional issues related to trauma, inattention, poor planning abilities, impulse control. Any suggestions on how to incorporate trauma-informed practice into our work? Peter, can I start with you on this?
Sure. I think the real key to that is to have a strong connection both between the community mental health providers as well as the treatment staff within the facility. I think a lot of that will depend upon the nature of the kids that are at the facility and the kinds of trauma they've experienced. Clearly, during that initial entry into the facility, that initial assessment process, which I just talked about the educational part of it, but clearly it needs to be multidisciplinary. Educators and others need to be informed about specific experiences that kids have had, about how that might affect and have an impact on their ability to successfully complete programs, learn new skills, and ultimately re-enter the community. So it's hard in a general way to say this is specifically what might happen, but I think as a general rule, there's no reason why group work, individual counseling, support can't be part of the process. And it's not a question of you do that or you do the education and vocational programming. I think they can be integrated.
Any comment from any other of the panelists on that question?
quickly,
Judge Cubbin, go ahead.
I would just quickly suggest to the person to go to the MacArthur Foundation and look at Summit County, that's Akron, Ohio's program. They call it the Responder Program, and it's a partnership between mental health, the courts, and the schools, and it's fabulous. And they probably could, that material would probably direct you to some of your physician assist you with the trauma issue.
Right, and that would be the MacArthur Foundation website, which is www.macfound.org. So I want to add to this an answer to this question. One last question we'll entertain. And the point I would make is that this trauma-informed practice also then extends into those school-based probation officers and them trained in trauma-informed care, to resource officers or school police department officers being trained in cognitive behavioral therapy, crisis intervention. Is it the front door, the pipeline into the system where those things will help de-escalate situations,
right,
or better inform them in dealing with behavior that may otherwise get kids in trouble, booted out of school, may result in ways to keep them in school, control the behavior, and keep them on an educational track. So I've seen some really good work from school systems, including most recently a complete system-wide training in the Miami-Dade School Police Department on these types of approaches. Last question. What educational specialists expected to do? What are their everyday responsibilities? And will he or she be considered to be an advocate for families if the school or educational issues arise? I'd like to talk about that issue, about the role of educational specialists.
Well, I can start the conversation, Shane.
Thanks,
the education specialist, their daily work entails looking at what youth are pending discharge over the next month, 6 weeks, and starting to prepare for the pre-release meeting with the schools, and doing the kind of work I described before, looking at making sure the transcript is ready to go, what was the schedule in the institution, what will it be like at school, and working on all the details that we trip on, typically, which include books and transportation and those kinds of activities. There also entails working with individual probation officers to help them solidify a good reentry education plan to make sure that going back to school is the right way, or should they do what Mick has been suggesting, to get into a GED or GED plus kind of an environment, or should they move into a trade or a career and technical program. So their task is to look at the education aspect of reentry and help probation officers and judges work the plan. That really is what their workday is like.
I have to bring it to close at that quick.
Yes. Here in Seattle, what we're doing with the educational specialists, one of their jobs sometimes is to work at one of our local training centers along with the case managers that are there, helping them with the educational issues, and that would be the connection to the schools, creating the plans and those kinds of things, where educational care managers may not have those kinds of skills. And so we use those positions to supplement the team that's involved at our various sites.
Great. Well, go on for another hour. I've got tons of questions still pouring in, clarifications coming in. But I want to thank our 4 panelists. This is going to conclude the webinar. After you exit the webinar, a brief survey will appear on the screen. By the questions in the survey, you will really help us a lot at the Resource Center improving the services we offer. We'd appreciate it if you take just a few minutes to complete the survey. So I don't want to see numbers going way down immediately after I say goodbye to you. Thanks all for your attendance and participation. Special thanks to Judge Cubbin and Dr. Leone, James Reland, and Dr. Moore for providing their experience, their insights into this really important issue in getting the reentry puzzle correct on the educational side. We will email a link to the recording of this presentation, as well as a link to a PDF of the PowerPoint slides used in the presentation later this week. The link will also be made available on the National Reentry Resource Center's website. Again, www.nationalreentryresourcecenter.org. Thanks to the Resource Center for being such a great resource to us nationally, and I wish you all the best of luck in the work in the months and years to come. Thank you, and goodbye.